I'll hand this over to my partner for this event, Mr. Mike Sibley with James Moore, to introduce our first speaker.
All right, well, thank you, Heather. And just really appreciate Velocity and Heather's time and joining us with these events. It's a lot to put on, but there's a lot of great information. And I also commend everybody either listening on the recording or attending just on getting a jump on this. So welcome back, everybody. I am also looking forward to all the content in today's session, as well as the content the next session. There's just a lot of very, very important information. So I'm excited to introduce Mike Kerrigan. Mike is with Vantex Planning Partners. Vantex is the James Moore partner in providing holistic financial planning to our clients. So we asked Mike to participate in this to give insight into this financial planning part of transition planning for the eventual transition. With Mike, we focus on what matters most to our clients and building that financial plan that looks at tax strategies and estate planning and risk management and retirement planning, all those important factors that are really critical to a transition plan. So Mike Kerrigan has been a financial planner for 17 years after service in the Army and some time in corporate America. He specializes in helping clients find their why during this transition process. For some, it's very simple, but for the majority of long-term business owners, it's much more complicated and has many facets. He's a certified financial planner and brings a depth of knowledge and experience working with business owners to this conversation, and is a great resource for us and our clients. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he's going to take it away. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, Mike, thanks for the introduction. As Mike mentioned, Vantex Planning Partners provides clients with some of the key answers necessary for a successful business transition. I've been helping clients with financial planning aspect of business transition for over 15 years, and many of my past clients have been a little confused when I refer to the process as a business transition rather than a business sale, because that's how the conversation normally starts is, hey, either somebody's made an offer or I'm considering selling my business and getting out. But in many cases, the traditional sale doesn't really fit a client situation. So we discuss ways for clients to accomplish multiple goals. During this process, we help clients identify some of the traditional stumbling blocks to a successful business transition early in the process. And that is primarily to save clients and the partners that they're working with time, money, and in many cases, family strife. I have seen some that have come to me late in the process, and they realized, hey, we didn't ask the right questions when we started doing this. And, they're 75% of the way done for a deal, and suddenly they go, well, is this a deal we really want? So part of the reason why I'm one of the early steps in any business transition process is we're going to help the family, the business owner and their family answer some of those questions that they're going to have during the sale process. And Scott Bushke and I have also worked together many years, and he tells me a lot of the nightmare stories about people that they've taken all the way to the closing table, and then they just can't sign the paperwork. The business owner just can't let go of the business because they have that last little worry about, am I doing the right thing? So we help clients get to, yes, we are doing the right thing. And now it's just a matter of getting the numbers correct. So what we're going to do in our conversation today, and I'm going to share some screens during this process, so this will be a little easier for you to follow and to understand what it is that we're talking about. So first, I liken the business transition process to a road trip. Given the time of the year, because we're in the summer and a lot of people are taking family vacations, I like using that. And like a road trip, there are some very important things that you need to answer right away. The first is, where are you today? Because with any successful road trip, you got to know, where are you starting? Where do you want to be? You got to know where you're going. And when do you want to get there? So those are some of the key things. I have some business owners that are coming to me 5 years out, and they said, well, sometime in the next 3 to 5 years, I would like to transition out of ownership. I have others that come to me and say, can I leave tomorrow? Well, I can tell you that if you own a business and you've been working on it for 25 plus years, you probably can't leave tomorrow. But it all comes down to finally that last question, which is, what do you need to do to make that transition happen successfully? And a lot of people just think about the internals to the business. They go, okay, well, we have to get the valuations right. We have to get the cash, the accounts payable, the accounts receivable, all that stuff has to be straight. We need to know our inventory. And a lot of people don't think about the fact that there are some other questions that you're going to need to answer that have more to do with your personal life and what you're going to be transitioning to than they do have to do with the business. In many cases, I'm working with business owners that founded a business 25 or 30 years ago, and this has been their life for the past 25 or 30 years. And many times, the biggest stumbling block is going to be letting go of something that's been such a huge part of a person's life over the years. And they start thinking about, what are the ways that I can potentially sell? And I'm going to talk through a few of these in the case study that we're going to do in just a minute. One of them is selling to a third party. I know this is going to seem strange for anybody that's gone through a business sale before, but this is normally the quickest and the easiest way for someone to transition into retirement. I have people that have said, hey, I went through a business sale process, and between the initial negotiations and all the due diligence, it took more than 12 months. I get it. But at the end of 12 months, in most cases, if you're selling to a third party, you may have them asking you to be available for 12 months, but you're pretty much just done. You're out of the business at the end of that process. And that business transitions, and you've received your payment for the business, and you walk away. If you're transitioning to a family member, I can tell you that is not a quick exit from the business. I don't care if that's a family member that's been working in the business for years. If it's a father-son type situation, I can tell you, son is going to be calling dad anytime something major comes up, and he's going to be asking for help. And in many cases, I've seen business founders that have handed it down to family members that 2 or 3 years down the road, if the business is struggling, they're working full time again. And this was the time that they wanted to be with grandkids and they wanted to be traveling, but now they've been sucked back into the business. So that's why I say selling to a third party in many cases is the quickest separation from that business. Selling to a family member, selling to employees. If it's a long-term employee that you've worked with for 20 years, it's not quite as bad as with a family member, but they're going to feel free to call you as well. So in many cases, that's also something you don't easily exit from. And finally, we have some clients that say, you know what, I built this, I'm willing to let go of control, and I want to step away over a period of time, but I think that this business is going to continue to do really well. So I'm willing to sell most of my business, but I still think that it's going to grow even more. I've set it up to be a great business in the future, and I want to retain some ownership. You're going to limit the people that you can sell it to by doing something like that. But I can tell you that that's also another method that we've seen used in the past. So with that, I am going to go ahead and I am going to introduce you to Johnny and Moira Rose, who are business owners. Let me, real quick, I got to switch which screen I'm sharing to you. And I'm going to give you a lot of background on Johnny and Moira. And since this is a case study, this is also based on real people. So I would tell you that this is based on an actual situation. We've changed the names, obviously, and we've changed a lot of the facts, but this is based on an actual situation. And I'm going to go through a lot of detail in here. And at the outset, you may wonder, why am I going through so much detail about these fake people? And the reason is that I want you to understand when we get to a conversation on why some of the decisions and some of the recommendations were made. If you don't understand their background, it's going to be a little harder to understand what the process looks like. So I'm going to take about 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm just going to go through who they are. So Johnny and Moira, give you a little bit of a background. He founded Rosebud is the name of the business. He founded Rosebud 25 years ago. And He had a brief job prior to founding this business, but it's pretty much been his whole professional life. And he's 62. He's getting close to the point that he wants to retire. And Moira also worked in the business in the early days. And so this very much is a family business in that Moira hasn't been working in the business consistently since about 5 years after the founding of the business, when she started raising the kids. But whenever she's needed, she steps back in. So she's very familiar with the business as well. And they feel that it's their business, not just his business. She's a little bit younger. As you can see, they have 2 kids. Little bit of background on that. David has been working in the business for a few years, but it's not his first job. And he's only been there for about 2 years. So he doesn't feel that he can take over the business at this point, and isn't even sure that he wants to. He went to school for something that's not really related to the business, but he moved into the business when he left his previous employer. Alexis is their daughter. She's never worked in the business, doesn't have any desire to work in the business. And each of them have 1 child. So they have 2 grandchildren, one from Alexis and one from David. A little bit more on that is David is actually Johnny's son from a previous marriage, and Alexis is their daughter. So they have a blended household. A little bit more, we go into a little bit more detail, and we always want to find all of the family relationships because you'd be amazed at how much of an effect it can have when you're constructing a plan. So we've also talked a little bit more. So we know that Lily Gardner is Moira's mother and doesn't live with them, but she lives very close by, and she spends a lot of time with the grandkids because David is also nearby. Alexis lives out of state, and they see her occasionally, but not all the time. So that's a little bit about them. And Lily is still living independently. She's 89 years old, which did play into some of our recommendations when we started talking about their situation. Both of Johnny's parents passed away fairly young. They were in, his dad was mid-60s and his mother was in her early 70s when they passed away. But Moira's father only died about 2 years ago, and Lily obviously is still living. So there's some longevity on Moira's side. So when we sat down, one of the first things that I asked them when we're getting together is, what's most important to you? For Johnny, it's pretty straightforward. Retirement planning is his number one. He's ready. He's 62. He knows that he's got to keep working in the business for at least another 3 years. So his window that he gave me is he's got 3 to 6 years and he wants to be retired. He's ready to do some traveling. He wants to spend more time with the grandkids because he's starting to hear all of the stories from Moira, who's spending a lot of time with the grandkids already. Minimizing taxes is also a big deal because he's thinking about, hey, I need to sell the business. I want to find ways to reduce that tax bill. So these are the 2 biggest things on his mind right now. And then he's thinking, when I sell, I'm going to have a huge pot of money. So I'm concerned about what do I do with that? So investment management is also high on his list. And then he's thinking family priorities after that. So he's thinking about a legacy after he thinks about selling the business and what do I do with the funds? And how do I make sure that they're going to last for our lifetime? So that's Johnny's perspective. Moira's perspective is very different. Her first priority is taking care of the grandkids because she's with them every day and taking care of the kids. And she wants to make sure that they're going to be taken care of because when she was growing up, she didn't have a lot of that was available. And for her, that's a very big priority. Retirement planning, making sure that they have enough for their lifestyle for Moira and Johnny. That's number 2 on her list. And then she also wants to make some contributions to charity. She has some charitable causes that she's passionate about. So they don't have exactly the same priorities when it comes to, hey, what's most important with this business sale? This is a very important thing to get out in the open right away. Because I can tell you that many of the business deals that I've seen blown up, this is what is the cause. Johnny goes through the entire sales process. He spends 6 to 12 months finding a right buyer, getting this big pot of money. And then the week before they're about to do the sale, they go on vacation and Moira says, I'm not ready for this. I don't think that we know if we have enough money. I don't think this deal is going to be enough to provide for all of these things that I want to be able to do for our family. And then Johnny comes back from vacation and goes, yeah, this sale isn't going to happen. So this is why I say this is a very important part of the early stages of this process, because the earlier you can get these out, the more likely you can structure the deal to be favorable for all of these concerns from the very beginning. So now that we've talked a little bit about that and those priorities, and like I said, this isn't us business for them. This was a family business. It wasn't just Johnny's decision. So he very much wanted to have that input and to understand what was going on. So as we go through it, we took these priorities and we said, okay, we can distill it down to basically two major goals. For retirement, Johnny and Moira both want to retire when he's 65. So they want to be done at 65. Now, granted, that's 3 years, and he said 3 to 6 years. So that at least gives us a window. And we're going to be looking at, hey, can you do it this soon? If everything could be put together, could you retire at 65? And they want to have $25,000 a month in today's dollars to support their lifestyle. Like I said, they want to do travel. They have a very nice home. They have a lot of nice things that they like to do. So their lifestyle is not inexpensive. And then Moira, especially, she wants to make sure that there's money to leave to the kids and the grandkids. That's very important. And I'm going to go back to some of the today's dollars of their spending money. One of Moira's concerns, and we don't actually plan for it in the plan, but one of her concerns is she wants to have a little bit of extra built into their plan because she's not sure if she's going to have to take care of her mother. Her mother's 89 years old. She's still living independently, but they don't know how much longer that's going to last. And they don't know how much longer she's going to be alive. So there may be an additional expense that we really can't project at this point. So she wants to make sure there's a little bit more. Taking a look at what have they accumulated over the years. They have investments of a little over $2 million, $2.5 million. But obviously their largest asset is the business. So you can see here we have some basic information on that, and we're valuing the business at about $7 million in today's dollars. You can see 6.3 million is what we're listing. The reason for that is they have about a $700,000 loan out there that is a business loan. So that's something that would have to be covered if they were to be able to sell it. So we're netting out some debt that they have on the business. They also own the commercial real estate free and clear. That commercial real estate, that is Rosebud's building. So he owns the building that the business is on. So when we look at it, he thinks that between the commercial real estate and the business, he's looking about $8.5 million that they have in value in that business. They have a home that still has a mortgage on it, and they also have a vacation home. And that vacation home is closer to their daughter, so they travel to where she is quite frequently. So that's a picture of them. So that's where they are. When we look at some of the things like, where is their income coming from? Well, Johnny's paying himself about $150,000 a year in salary, and he takes about another $450,000 a year in distributions. For those of you that are structured as an S Corp, you might understand that. One of the things that you'll see up here is that he did put a 401k in place for Rosebud. Well, he did that about 10 years after the business was founded. So he's been funding that 401k for about 15 years. And that's part of the reason why we're paying him a pretty decent salary, is just to make sure that he can take advantage of that 401k that he's put into place. So now we're going to start taking a look at what are some of the thoughts that we have when we start looking at a business sale. So the first thing that we always want to take a look at is he knows that he can get at least $5 million for the business. He's already had an unsolicited offer, all cash, for someone to buy the business from him last year for about $4.5 million. So he knows that the business has at least a $5 million value. He could go back to that buyer. It's actually one of his competitors, and they've been after him for years as a potential succession plan. And they have a good relationship, even though they are competitors. They have a decent relationship. And he has looked at that as part of an emergency succession plan, which is many times someone has a buy-sell agreement in place. He has no partner, but he does have a buy-sell agreement with one of his competitors, which I know sounds a little strange, but in his case, it actually made sense, which is they had agreed that when this person made that unsolicited offer, they didn't take the offer, but they did come to an agreement on a buy-sell agreement, which is, hey, if anything happens to me, my family will sell you the business for this agreed to value. So it turned out to be a very good thing for both of them, which is this competitor now knows, we aren't going to suddenly have somebody else moving into the market that we have to worry about. And we don't have to worry about a huge disruption in their market, because they are competitors, but they do things that are slightly different. It was a win-win for both of them. Is he now knows that, hey, if something happens to me, Moira is going to get at least that $5 million payout from his competitor. So it's someone that he knows is very interested in buying the business. But there is a downside. And the downside is we took a look at it and he said, okay, this is an easy check the box. If I want to do this, I know I can go back to him and I can get at least that $5 million. We didn't do a big valuation. We basically just said, he said, hey, this is what I think it's worth, and I'm willing to pay that, regardless of what we find during a due diligence process. So we took a look at it and said, if you sell it at age 65 for $5 million, how does that look? And at first glance, it looks pretty successful. And Johnny is initially kind of excited by that. And then I go, well, wait a minute. Let's go back and talk about some of the priorities that you've already mentioned, which is, this is just covering lifestyle and none of the other things you've talked about. So we got a little bit more detail. Moira has already said, hey, the kids are getting to school age and I want to make sure that we can pay for private school for both of the kids. Well, that's a pretty hefty draw on the money that's out there already, because they're going to be gifting about $30,000 a year for each of the kids for private school. And we can just assume that those expenses are going to keep going through them being into college and things like that, which could even be a little bit more. We didn't talk about them fully funding college at this point. We're just talking about private school. One of the other concerns is part of that $5 million number is he's considering also basically selling to David, his son, for that value. He goes, hey, if we're gonna transition it to family, I would probably want to discount it about that $2 million. Well, it's very important to Moira to keep things equal between the two children. So she said, well, if we're going to do that, then I want to make sure that there's something there for Lily. And so they talked about doing a life insurance policy to cover that $2 million that they would make available just to Lily. So that's not going to be part of the estate. That's going to transfer outside of the estate just to her. So once we started looking at these priorities and we looked at the $5 million of sales, he's looking at it and he's going, well, I'm not sure I'm as comfortable with that. So we said, okay, let's stress test it and let's take a look at, what are your odds that that's going to be successful? And as soon as I show him, over the next 30 years, the odds of success are only about 24%. He goes, yeah, I'm not thrilled with that, because we don't have a whole lot of extra built into this plan. So yeah, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. And so we start talking about, well, what are some of the options? One of the first ones that comes out is let's lower your lifestyle by $50,000 a year. Let's see how that affects things. And right away, we've now doubled their odds of success simply by lowering their expenses by about $50,000 a year. But neither one of them is really excited by that idea. You know, they've worked a really long time, worked very hard to get to the point where they are, and they want to be rewarded for everything that they've done all of these years. So now they start looking at it and say, well, let's get a valuation on the business. Let's see what the market can really bear. And I can tell you what happened is they came back. Let's say Scott and his team took a look at the business and they come back with about a $7 million value for the business today. But Johnny says, you know what? I think that if we could get $7 million today and we've got 3 to 6 years, I think I can increase that value by another $1 million during that period of time. So I think that we can get the business to $8 million by my retirement date. Well, now we've got to a situation that works. So we're now to a situation that he's comfortable saying, okay, a lot of things can happen and we're still likely to have a fair amount of assets left for the kids at the end of everything. And I'm not going to worry about money. So that takes away a lot of his concerns of like many other business owners in the current environment. He says, I understand when you say that I can get a long-term rate of return of, let's call it 6%. He goes, I understand that. And I understand you're showing me what has historically happened, but I'm not comfortable with where we are politically, with where the company is financially. I don't think that the next 10 years are going to be anything like the last 10 years. And I said, okay, that's what this stress test is about. So we're looking at lots of really good scenarios. We're looking at midterm scenarios, and we're looking at a lot of really horrible scenarios. So we're looking at 1,000 different scenarios and saying, okay, how likely is it that we're going to have anything where you can potentially run out of money? And we got to a point to where he's comfortable with anything over about 80%, because he said, we're not just going to put this plan in place and never make a change to it for 25 years of retirement. He understands we'll adjust over time and we're going to take advantage of what's going on at the time. So he thinks 84%, we've got good chance that we can adjust during the time frame and we're never going to run out of money. So he's now comfortable with this plan. So now we have established what is the value that he's willing to take from a third party. Because there were a lot of questions that he had that went into, okay, how are we getting to these numbers? So I'm going to show you one of the biggest ones that he had a question on. And this is something that Mike will talk about in a little bit more detail during his section. But I'm going to take a look at what was the tax impact of selling his business. So he sells his business all at one time. Not many people like it when you tell them, well, when you sell your business, don't forget, April of the next year, you got to write a $1.4 million check to the IRS. He wasn't thrilled by that. And when we started going through the numbers, he's like, wait a minute. So my $8 million is really only about 6.5. And I said, well, yeah. And that's actually because you did some good things when you set it up, meaning we're looking at capital gains tax rates. So you can see here, we're looking at capital gains because of how he structured the business. That's what he's able to do. Well, I can tell you that there are some other clients that I've worked with where they're looking at income rates when they sell their business. So that's definitely one of the things that you will want to talk to your tax professional about when you're going through it, to make sure you're getting the best tax treatment as you can. So taxes were very important to him. That was one of his big concerns. And he goes, okay, even with this huge tax payment, we're still okay. So now he understands we are talking about it. We are considering it. And we're saying, okay, here's what you're likely to have to pay in taxes, given your situation. We're building it into the plan. So he understands there isn't going to be, after you sell the business, there isn't going to be a shock or something that's unexpected. And now suddenly you have a lack of confidence in the plan that you've just made. So a few other things that he is very happy about with the deal that they're looking at is that we haven't actually sold the real estate. So he's only selling the business for $8 million. That is the value of the business, not the value of the real estate. So he's considering, right now we're saying, hey, you're not going to sell the real estate. They're going to be tenants and they're going to be leasing back that building from you over time. And so he goes, okay, well, a lot of these buyers have already said, we don't want to lease the building back. We want to go ahead and buy it outright. So what would that look like? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to now sell the building to them as well at retirement. So now instead of an $8 million sale, you're going to be having closer to a $10 million sale, because we're also seeing some appreciation in that commercial real estate. Their probability of success jumps dramatically because they have additional cash. But that is kind of a two-edged question. The reason I would tell you that is that he really likes that income stream that real estate is providing to him personally, because he, as his business, leases that back from him, because he personally owns the real estate and his business leases it back from him. He really likes the idea of that. So this is one where we just say, hey, if that's a requirement of the sale, it does not hurt you. It is also a help. So that just gave him comfort in knowing if that's a condition of the sale, he's still going to be okay. But either way, whether he sells it or he retains it, his plan works. So again, this is just a way for us to address all of the stumbling blocks at the beginning, so that, if that becomes a condition of the sale and he goes, wait a minute, I don't want to sell that property, he already has an answer to the question of, is that going to help or hurt? And as long as he knows, hey, it's not going to hurt me, he's comfortable with it. So we've gotten to a point now, we know $8 million is a value that if he gets any offer that is going to that's going to be a gross offer above $8 million, he's ready to sign. And Moira has said, yes, if you get an offer, go ahead, take it. We're comfortable with that. And I can tell you that right there, that's 90% of taking that weight off of his shoulders when he's sitting at that final table. So he's sitting here and he's going, okay, now I'm looking at, here are all the things that I can go do, not having any concern about, am I doing the right thing? Am I going to be able to continue to have the life that I want when we get to that table? So I know I haven't seen any questions yet, but please feel free. If you have any questions about how we got through that process, please let me know, because now I'm going to shift to some of the other questions, which is, okay, if you're transitioning to a family member, or you're going to be selling it to an employee. So these are somewhat similar in what we would look at. And now we're going to look at a little bit more of a structure that's just different. So it's not so much that we're looking at, hey, you're not going to sell and you're not going to get anything for the business, but we're looking at how do you sell it to another family member and make it look a little bit more appealing to them. Okay. And feel free to ask any questions as we're going now. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make some changes to this. So we're going to change from selling the business for $8 million. So that's just selling to a third party. Now what we're going to do, and yes, we understand we have no probability of success because we're not selling it for anything yet. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at selling the business for $7 million. So we're discounting the business because we're selling it to a family member. So he's like, okay, if we can sell it for 8, we have that valuation. We're willing to knock $1 million off of that price because we're selling it to a family member. So you're given a pretty good discount, but you are going to require them to go out and get some debt. So they're going to pay 20% down, and then you're going to finance them for a 10-year note at 6%. So I've had a lot of people that have said, well, we've seen a lot more complicated scenarios for this. Totally agree. I've seen some that are extremely complicated and that last for considerably longer, and some that are much shorter. So what I'm looking at here is something that's easy to explain. Why would their son David want to do this when he's only been in the business for about 2 years? Why would he be considering this? Well, He's been working in that business long enough, and he's seen his father working in the business long enough that he's confident that, yes, it's going to continue to make money. Currently, they're not paying him more than what his job title is. So he's being paid like they would hire anybody to come in and do that job. So it's not like he's having the family bonus for working at the business. Dad is netting about $600,000 a year out of the business, but their son is only making about $70,000 as one of their senior managers. So we're going to be selling it. So this is going to require him to go out, get some debt, and then he's going to be paying that 10-year note. That's going to be coming out. A lot of the business income is going to be paying out that 6-year note. So as long as he's able to continue to grow the business, he thinks, yeah, I can continue to make a low to reasonable salary and still afford to pay my debt, and also pay mom and dad over that 10-year period at 6%. So I do believe that I can make that work. We take a look at it from a success standpoint, and I have warned them right up front, this is not going to be as successful. I mean, you have a lower sales value and you're going to be spreading this out over a longer period of time. So, at the outset, when we look at just selling the business, now we're only at 57%. And again, I go, well, we can also lower the amount that you're going to be gifting. And this is also when we looked at potentially lowering that, but Johnny also came back and said, hey, if we're giving him essentially $1 million, maybe we can stop paying for school. We don't have to keep gifting him $30,000 a year, which he's basically just paying back to us. So we take a look at it. Now we're back into the range that he's comfortable with. And so Johnny says, yeah, okay, we're getting close. I'm going to retain the real estate, and I think that I can gradually raise his rents. And we don't have that illustrated in here, but he thinks that he's willing to do that. And he goes, okay, well, at the end of paying us off, I will then sell you the real estate. So we're going to be charging you rent on the building. You're going to pay us 20% down, and you're going to pay us for 10 years to pay off the business. Then at the end of that, you're going to go out and you're going to refinance the property, and we're going to get a lump sum payout in 2035, which is after he's paid all of this off. So he's like, I'm not going to make you pay for the real estate at the beginning. So that's just way too much debt for you to take on. So essentially you pay off the debt, and then you're going to go out and acquire more debt on the building and pay us out for the building. And now we're back to a situation where they're comfortable again. They go, okay, Moira's happy because, they have given David a lot. They gave him $1 million discount on the business. They're able to get out and support their lifestyle. And he now has Rosebud, and he's going to have a really bright future ahead of him. They haven't forgotten about Lily and her family. They have a $2 million policy that's out there that is going to pay out to her at their death. Part of her situation is her spouse, he does really well. So they're not worried about money. So this is more about making things equal rather than it is, hey, we got to make sure that Lily can pay all of her bills. They're not worried about that. They do very well off and they don't need the money, but Moira, it's very important to feel that they have given equitably to both of the kids. So in this situation, they found a way to take a look at, okay, we know what we could sell it for. We're willing to get a little bit less to be able to give this business to David and have it be in the family. And this is now kind of their number one priority. They're talking about how to do this, but they also have thought through, what if he changes his mind sometime in the next 3 years? And Heather, I see that you unmuted. Is there a question?
No question. I was just noticing the time. We've probably got about 5 minutes or so, and we'll need to wrap up.
Yep, I'm getting close.
This is great. I think everybody's just enthralled because I'm falling in love with this dashboard you've got.
Great. So, in this case, they have found a way that they can now transition this business to the next generation. I can tell you this right here, this is based on a real situation, and this is something that they wanted to do. I can tell you in the case of the actual person though, the sale to the family member never actually happened. What happened is that David worked in the business for another 2 years, and dad kept giving him more and more responsibility. Well, when he started getting to the point to where dad would take off for 3 weeks at a time, David said, no, I do not want to be the head honcho forever in this business. I don't think that I can run it as well as dad. Dad, quite honestly, drove that conversation because he would come back from being gone for 3 weeks and would walk into a disaster. And he had all kinds of HR issues that he was dealing with, and he had a lot of supplier issues that he was dealing with. And he just said, hey, either you got to step up your game, or I just don't think this is going to work. He goes, it's not that we don't love you and we don't want to transition this to you. We don't think you're going to be successful at this unless you can figure these things out. And David agreed. He would love to get it, but at the end of the day, he realized that he was not going to be an ideal business owner. He did not have the same drive or whatever it is that made Johnny much more successful. He didn't have whatever his dad had. And when I say going through this process helps avoid the family strife, those are the kinds of things I'm talking about, which is if Johnny had just gone another 3 years and then decided to sell the business, and David had been saying, hey, I thought you were grooming me to take over the business, there could be a lot of conflict and a lot of hard feelings there. But because they had this potential 3-year transition process, and about halfway through the process found out it isn't going to happen, not because we don't love you, not because we don't want to do it, but simply because he knows he's not capable of doing the same job. They were both happy to say, okay, let's go back and let's look at, what have you done? Have you helped with this? What are some of the things that we think you should be doing? And we're going to move forward. So they were able to go back to the original plan, and now they're in the process of selling the business. And they're at about year 4, and they're going to be selling the business. It's just a matter of, how much are you going to be splitting off to different family members? But they're back to their old plan of selling the business for $8 million gross. Now, you can see in here, we've got other potential possibilities. We talked about selling a portion of the business and retaining it. He basically came to the fact of, during that 3-year process, he realized, once I'm gone, I don't want people pulling me back in. Yes, it's my baby. Yes, I've built it up for 25 years, but once I'm gone, I want to be gone. So that's where we came to. So I'm going to close this up now because obviously we're coming up really close on time. And let me stop sharing Johnny and Moira's plan, and I'm going to go back to a couple of the things that we look through. So just so you understand, that process, that's called our GPS process. That's guidance, planning, and strategies, because we're providing guidance through doing a good plan for them. And we're going to give strategies. And one of the things that you will have noticed in several of the things that I talked about is we are not doing this in a vacuum. Mike, Scott, and all the team at Velocity, we work together to help clients get to this life that we're designing for them. Without all of those components, you're not going to have the solution that you want, which is, in this case, like I said, the current value is $7 million. Well, how do you get from $7 to $8 million? Well, that's where Mike and Velocity help do that process. That's not something that I'm helping them with. I'm just helping guide them on what is it that you need at the finish line. And other portions of the team are who are helping get that done. So it's very much a team process. And some of the other questions, and I mentioned them as we went through, is how do the taxes affect what I really have? Some of the questions that come up, how do I reward long-term employees? We talked about how they're going to do things with the kids. And I did not bring it into this discussion, but what happens if you have business partners? Do both of them have to sell? What about their family? I mean, we only had 50 minutes today, so that was why I couldn't even get into any of those questions, because those get even more in depth. So if there's anything that you take out of today's session, what I would tell you is make sure you start having these conversations now. If you have that 3 to 5 year time frame, that's about what it takes. I mean, from the start of we're looking at what do you want your lifestyle to look like, to getting the number that you want and making sure that it's going to satisfy you. That's not something that you can say, you can come in and say, hey, I sold my business last week. Can we do a financial plan that works for me? I wish I could say that's never happened. I have had that happen, but unfortunately I can tell you that, hey, we got to reduce lifestyle. That becomes much more common when somebody's coming to me after they've sold a business rather than coming to me ahead of time. And then we can take that whole team approach to getting you the value that you want to provide for the lifestyle that you need.
Right.
So, as I mentioned at the outset, I am available for questions. I think you guys have my contact information. Like I said, we're all part of a team, so feel free to contact me through any of the others as well. And with that, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the sessions.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I absolutely love that dashboard. That was really impressive. I think what I love that you brought up, and I think that everybody else on the all the panelists would support this, is that need and emphasis of really having those conversations early on with the other people and players involved, and making sure that those priorities are aligned. Because I think that when you don't have those conversations for whatever reason, and I think I'm seeing it happen a lot more. I won't say a lot more, but at a steady rate higher in family-owned businesses, where for whatever reason, those there's some communication struggles, there's some conflict there, and those conversations just aren't happening in a way that they need to, and you end up with people getting to the finish line and they're just not aligned, and you end up in struggle. So I think that was wonderful. We will send out any additional questions that come in. We will send out your contact information, Mike, to everybody as well that's on the call. So I really appreciate that. So we're going to come back in about 15 minutes, 14 minutes. No, I can't do math. Nine minutes.
9 minutes.
That's why we have an accountant on the call. We're going to come back in 9 minutes, and we'll get started with Scott Bushke with Cornerstone Business Services. He's going to talk about valuing the business, which, as we can see, that's knowing what your number is critical to this, and bringing in that team that's going to work together to say, okay, this is what the business is worth now. This is what I want and what I need for my life plans after I sell this business. How are we going to get there? So we're going to start digging into all of that next. So we're going to go off camera and see you all in a few minutes. Thank you. Thanks.